8-year-old Emma Rodriguez adjusted her position in her bright pink wheelchair, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she gazed up at the imposing gates of Buckingham Palace. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard where dozens of tourists gathered, cameras ready to capture the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Emma had been dreaming of this moment for months. Ever since her parents had promised her this special trip to London as a reward for her courage during countless medical treatments, the little girl wore her favorite dress, a navy blue one decorated with tiny British flags that her grandmother had sewn on specially for this occasion. Her long, dark hair was pulled back with a red ribbon, and pinned to her collar was a small badge that read, "Future Soldier, a gift from her older brother who is currently serving overseas with the military." Despite the challenges that had confined her to the wheelchair since birth, Emma's spirit remained unbroken, and her fascination with military ceremonies had only grown stronger over the years. Guard Sergeant Michael Hayes stood at attention in his iconic red tunic and tall black bearskin hat, his polished boots reflecting the morning light as he maintained the rigid posture required of the Queen's Guard. At 28 years old, he had been serving in this prestigious position for 3 years. Having worked his way up through the ranks with dedication and unwavering discipline, his training had been rigorous, teaching him to remain motionless and expressionless regardless of weather conditions, tourist behavior, or any distractions that might occur during his duty. The crowd around the palace gates had grown larger as the ceremony time approached. With families positioning themselves for the best views of the colorful spectacle, tour guides spoke in multiple languages, explaining the history and significance of the traditions they were about to witness. Children pressed against the iron railings, their faces filled with wonder at the possibility of seeing real soldiers in their magnificent uniforms. Emma's parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, had saved for 2 years to make this trip possible. Their daughter's medical expenses had been overwhelming, but they had watched her face light up whenever she saw military ceremonies on television, and they knew this experience would mean everything to her. They had researched the best viewing spots and arrived early to ensure Emma would have an unobstructed view from her wheelchair position near the end. Front of the crowd, the little girl's eyes moved from guard to guard, studying their uniforms and equipment with the intensity of someone who had spent countless hours reading about military traditions and protocols. She had memorized the different ranks, understood the significance of various medals and insignia, and could identify the different regiments by their uniform details. Her knowledge impressed even the adult tourists standing nearby, who found themselves learning from her enthusiastic explanations. Sergeant Hayes had noticed the young girl in the wheelchair from the moment he had taken his position. Something about her obvious excitement and the way she studied every detail of the ceremony. Preparation caught his attention. Though his training required him to maintain his stoic demeanor, regardless of what was happening around him, he had been taught that breaking protocol was never acceptable, that the dignity and tradition of the Queen's Guard depended on each soldier's ability to remain unmoved by external circumstances. The morning air was crisp and clear, perfect weather for the ceremony that drew visitors from around the world. Street vendors nearby sold miniature flags and toy soldiers, while photographers adjusted their equipment to capture the perfect shots. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as everyone waited for the formal proceedings to begin. Emma's small hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair as she leaned forward slightly, not wanting to miss a single moment of the spectacle she had dreamed about for so long. Her parents stood protectively behind her, their own excitement growing as they watched their daughter's joy. They had brought her here hoping to create a beautiful memory that would sustain her through future medical challenges, never imagining that this day would become something far more significant than a simple tourist experience. The palace courtyard echoed with the sounds of preparation as other guards took their positions, and the crowd settled into respectful silence. Emma's breathing quickened with anticipation, her young heart filled with admiration for the soldiers who served their country with such dedication and honor. She had no way of knowing that her presence would soon challenge everything one particular guard had been taught about maintaining military protocol. The ceremony was about to begin, and with it, a moment that would touch the hearts of everyone present and remind them all that sometimes the most powerful displays of respect and humanity come from the most unexpected sources. The stage was set for an encounter that would transform a routine military ceremony into an unforgettable demonstration of courage, compassion, and the unbreakable connection between those who serve and those who honor their service. The ceremonial music began to play, filling the courtyard with the stirring sounds of traditional military marches that had echoed through these same grounds for centuries. Emma's face transformed with pure wonder as the guards began their precisely choreographed movements, each step executed with perfect timing and discipline. Her small hands unconsciously moved to her heart as she watched the magnificent display of military precision unfolding before her eyes. Sergeant Hayes maintained his rigid position, but from the corner of his eye, he continued to observe the young girl's reactions. Her obvious reverence for the ceremony and genuine understanding of its significance set her apart from the typical tourist crowd. He could see her lips moving slightly as she silently counted the cadence of the marching steps, demonstrating a knowledge that went far beyond casual interest. Other tourists around, Emma began to notice her intense focus and deep appreciation for what they were witnessing. Several adults found themselves watching her reactions as much as the ceremony itself, moved by the sight of a child who clearly understood the honor and tradition being displayed before them. Her wheelchair seemed to disappear as observers saw only her bright spirit and obvious respect for military service. The changing of the guard proceeded with its usual pomp and circumstance, each movement performed with the mechanical precision that had been drilled into every soldier through months of intensive training. The guards moved as one unit, their synchronized steps creating a rhythmic sound that echoed off the palace walls. Tourist cameras clicked constantly, but Emma simply watched with wide eyes, wanting to absorb every detail of this once-in-a-lifetime experience. As the ceremony reached its midpoint, Emma's excitement became increasingly difficult to contain. She had studied this ritual so many times in books and videos, but seeing it in person was beyond anything she had imagined. The colors seemed brighter, the music more stirring, and the discipline of the guards more impressive than any description could have conveyed. Her parents watched with tears in their eyes as their daughter experienced pure joy, despite all the challenges she had faced in her young life. A gentle breeze stirred through the courtyard, causing the guards' plumes to flutter slightly as they maintained their positions. The crowd had grown even larger, with people pressed against the railings and straining to see over the heads in front of them. But Emma's position near the front gave her an unobstructed view of the magnificent spectacle, and she was determined not to miss a single moment. Sergeant Hayes found his attention repeatedly drawn to the little girl, though his training demanded that he focus solely on his ceremonial duties. There was something about her obvious respect and understanding that spoke to him on a deeper level than the casual interest shown by most observers. Her presence reminded him of why he had chosen to serve, of the honor and tradition he was sworn to uphold. The ceremony continued with its ancient rhythms, each phase executed with the same precision that had characterized these rituals for generations. Guards moved in formation, their movements creating patterns that had been perfected over centuries of military tradition. The crowd watched in respectful silence, understanding that they were witnessing something far more significant than mere entertainment. Emma's knowledge of military protocol had prepared her for what would happen next in the ceremony, but nothing could have prepared her for the overwhelming emotion she felt watching it unfold in real life. The discipline, the honor, the dedication displayed by each guard represented everything she admired about military service. Her brother's letters had described similar ceremonies, but experiencing one firsthand was transforming her understanding of what it meant to serve. The morning sun climbed higher, casting different shadows across the courtyard as the ceremony progressed through its carefully orchestrated phases. Each guard maintained perfect posture despite the physical demands of remaining motionless for extended periods. Their training had prepared them for this, but it required constant mental discipline to execute their duties flawlessly while surrounded by crowds and distractions. As the ceremony moved toward its conclusion, Emma felt a surge of impulse building within her. Her respect for these soldiers and everything they represented had reached a peak that demanded expression. She had watched them honor their traditions with such dedication, and something deep inside her young heart felt compelled to honor them in return. The crowd began to sense that something special was about to happen. Though they couldn't identify exactly what was creating the subtle shift in atmosphere, Emma's parents noticed their daughter's increased intensity and the way she was gripping her wheelchair's armrests. The little girl's entire body seemed to vibrate with emotion as she prepared to do something that would surprise everyone present, including herself. Without any warning or hesitation, Emma straightened herself in her wheelchair as much as her physical limitations would allow. Her small right hand rose slowly but deliberately to her forehead in the most perfect military salute her 8-year-old body could manage. The gesture was precise and respectful, clearly demonstrating that she understood the proper form and meaning behind this traditional military courtesy. The crowd around her fell into stunned silence as they witnessed this unexpected display of respect. From such a young child, parents lifted their own children to see better, while adults found themselves moved by the sincerity and dignity of Emma's salute. There was something profoundly touching about watching a little girl in a wheelchair honor the guards with such obvious reverence and understanding of military protocol. Sergeant Hayes felt his breath catch in his throat as he observed Emma's perfect salute directed specifically toward him. For 3 years, he had maintained unwavering discipline during countless ceremonies, never allowing external events to affect his performance. But the sight of this young girl showing such genuine respect and military courtesy challenged everything he had been taught about maintaining stoic professionalism. The other guards maintained their positions, but several had noticed the extraordinary moment unfolding near the front of the crowd. Emma held her salute with remarkable steadiness, her face serious and respectful as she honored the soldiers she so clearly admired. The gesture lasted for what felt like an eternity. Though it was only a few seconds of clock time, tourists began reaching for their cameras, instinctively recognizing that they were witnessing something special. But many found themselves too moved to focus on documentation. The pure emotion and respect displayed by the little girl seemed too sacred to capture casually. Several people in the crowd felt tears forming in their eyes as they watched this display of honor between a child and the soldiers she so obviously revered. Emma's parents stood frozen behind her wheelchair, their hearts swelling with pride and emotion as they watched their daughter's spontaneous tribute to military service. They had known about her fascination with military traditions, but seeing her express such perfect respect in this moment revealed the depth of her understanding and appreciation for those who serve their country. The internal struggle within Sergeant Hayes intensified as he watched Emma maintain her salute. Every aspect of his training screamed that he must remain motionless and expressionless, that acknowledging civilians during ceremony was strictly forbidden. But something deeper than protocol was stirring within him, a recognition of the genuine honor being shown by this remarkable young girl. The ceremony continued around them, but for those close enough to witness Emma's salute, time seemed suspended. The little girl's gesture had transformed the formal ritual into something more personal and meaningful. Her obvious physical challenges made her perfect military courtesy even more impressive, demonstrating that true respect for service transcends any limitations or obstacles. Other children in the crowd began to understand what Emma was doing, and several attempted their own salutes. Though none matched the precision and sincerity of her gesture, parents quietly encouraged their children's participation, recognizing that they were witnessing an important lesson about respect, honor, and appreciating those who serve their communities and country. At the weight of the moment pressed heavily on Sergeant Hayes as he struggled with the competing demands of military protocol and human emotion. His training had prepared him for many challenges, but not for the sight of a young girl in a wheelchair demonstrating such perfect understanding of military courtesy. The sincerity in her eyes and the steadiness of her salute spoke to something fundamental about service and sacrifice. Emma's endurance was remarkable as she maintained her salute, clearly determined to show proper respect regardless of any physical discomfort. Her understanding of military protocol was evident in the way she held her position, waiting for an acknowledgement that would complete the traditional exchange of military courtesy. The crowd sensed that something unprecedented was about to happen. The tension between military discipline and human compassion was building to a crescendo that would require resolution. Everyone present seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see how this extraordinary moment would conclude. Sergeant Hayes found himself at a crossroads between the rigid demands of his training and the powerful call of his humanity. The little girl's perfect salute deserved recognition, but providing it would mean breaking protocols that had been drilled into him through years of service. The decision he was about to make would surprise everyone present, including himself. In a moment that would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives, Sergeant Hayes made a decision that came from his heart rather than his training manual. Slowly, deliberately, and with the same precision that characterized all his military movements, he raised his right hand to his forehead in a crisp, respectful return salute directed specifically at the young girl in the wheelchair. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause and cheers, many people openly weeping at the beautiful exchange they had just witnessed. The sound echoed off the palace walls, creating a thunderous appreciation for both the little girl's respectful gesture and the guard's compassionate response. Cameras flashed as people scrambled to capture this extraordinary moment of human connection. Transcending formal protocol, Emma's face transformed with pure joy and amazement as she realized that the guard had acknowledged her salute. Her eyes sparkled with tears of happiness as she slowly lowered her hand,
Agree.
understanding that she had just participated in a genuine military exchange with a real soldier. The moment fulfilled every dream she had harbored about connecting with the military. Service members she so deeply admired, the other guards maintained their positions, but several smiled slightly despite their training. Moved by their colleagues' decision to honor the young girl's gesture, they understood the significance of what had just occurred and the courage it had taken for Sergeant Hayes to break protocol in service of something more important than regulations. Maria Rodriguez covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter's pure joy. Carlos wrapped his arms around his wife, both parents overwhelmed by the beauty of what their child had just experienced. They had brought Emma to London, hoping to create a special memory, never imagining they would witness such an extraordinary demonstration of mutual respect and honor. Tour guides paused their commentary, recognizing that words could not adequately describe what everyone had just witnessed. The formal ceremony continued around them, but this spontaneous exchange between a young girl and the soldier had created its own sacred moment that transcended the scripted rituals of the changing of the guard. Sergeant Hayes felt a profound sense of rightness about his decision, despite knowing that he had violated explicit protocols. Looking at Emma's radiant face, he understood that some moments in life are more important than regulations. The little girl's obvious respect for military service and her perfect execution of the salute had earned a response that honored both her gesture and the values he had sworn to uphold. Other children in the crowd began saluting as well. Inspired by Emma's courage and the guard's response, parents helped younger children understand what they had witnessed, explaining how sometimes the most meaningful moments come from spontaneous expressions of respect and appreciation. The courtyard had become an impromptu classroom in the values of honor, service, and human compassion. British tourists in the crowd felt particular pride in witnessing this exchange, understanding that they had seen their military traditions honored in the most genuine and heartfelt way possible. International visitors were equally moved, recognizing that respect for service members transcends national boundaries and speaks to universal values about duty and sacrifice. The ceremony concluded with its usual precision, but the mood in the courtyard remained electric with emotion. People were reluctant to leave, wanting to hold on to the feeling of having witnessed something truly special. Conversations buzzed with excitement as strangers shared their reactions to the extraordinary moment they had all experienced together. Emma remained in her wheelchair near the front of the crowd. Still glowing with happiness from her interaction with Sergeant Hayes, she kept looking back toward where he stood, as if wanting to memorize every detail of the guard who had acknowledged her respect with such kindness. Her parents knew this moment would sustain her through future challenges and remind her that her admiration for military service was shared and appreciated. News photographers who had been covering the routine ceremony realized they had captured something far more significant than the usual tourist shots. The images of Emma's salute and the guard's response would soon travel around the world, touching hearts and reminding people everywhere about the power of genuine respect and human connection. As the crowd began to disperse, many people approached Emma and her parents to express their appreciation for what they had witnessed. Strangers became temporary friends, united by the shared experience of seeing how a young girl's courage and a soldier's compassion had created a moment of pure beauty that none of them would ever forget. As the formal ceremony concluded and the crowds began to thin, Sergeant Hayes completed his official duties but found himself unable to stop thinking about the young girl in the wheelchair. When his replacement arrived for the next shift, he made an unprecedented decision to seek permission to speak with Emma and her family before they left the palace grounds. His commanding officer, Captain William Thompson, had witnessed the entire exchange and was initially prepared to address the protocol violation according to military regulations. However, the captain had also seen the profound impact of the moment on both the crowd and his soldier, and he understood that some situations transcend standard procedures. After a brief conversation, he granted permission for Sergeant Hayes to have a few minutes of personal time with the family. Emma was still beaming with joy when she noticed the tall guard in the red tunic approaching their small group near the palace gates. Her parents had been taking photographs and trying to capture their daughter's excitement when they realized that the same soldier who had returned her salute was walking directly toward them with purposeful steps. Sergeant Hayes removed his bearskin hat and approached the family with the same dignity and respect he brought to his ceremonial duties. His usually stern expression had softened, revealing the genuine warmth beneath his military bearing. Emma's eyes widened with amazement as she realized that the guard she had saluted was coming specifically to speak with her. "Excuse me," Sergeant Hayes said in his crisp British accent, addressing Emma's parents first out of respect. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I wanted to personally thank your daughter for the most perfect military salute I've ever had the honor to receive. My name is Michael Hayes, and I've been serving as a Queen's Guard for 3 years, but I've never encountered anyone who showed such genuine understanding of military courtesy." Maria and Carlos Rodriguez were speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by the unexpected visit from the soldier their daughter so clearly admired. They quickly introduced themselves and explained how much this trip and the ceremony had meant to Emma, who had been fascinated by military traditions since she was very young. Emma found her voice and, with characteristic directness, asked Sergeant Hayes about his service, his uniform, and whether her salute had been executed properly. Her questions demonstrated such thorough knowledge of military protocol that the seasoned soldier was genuinely impressed by her understanding of traditions that many adults never fully grasp. "Your salute was absolutely perfect," Sergeant Hayes assured her, kneeling down so they could speak at eye level. "I could tell immediately that you understood exactly what it meant and why it was important. That level of respect deserves to be acknowledged, regardless of any rules about staying motionless during ceremonies." Other tourists and palace visitors began to notice the conversation taking place between the guard and the little girl in the wheelchair. Word spread quickly that this was the same soldier who had broken protocol to return the child's salute, and a respectful crowd gathered at a distance to observe this remarkable continuation of their earlier exchange. Emma's parents learned that Sergeant Hayes had a younger sister with similar physical challenges, which had made Emma's gesture even more meaningful to him. He understood the determination and courage required for her to position herself for the ceremony and to execute such a perfect salute. Despite her physical limitations, the conversation revealed that Emma's knowledge of military traditions extended far beyond what anyone had realized. She could identify different regimental insignia, understood the historical significance of various ceremonies, and had been corresponding with her older brother about military life during his overseas deployment. Sergeant Hayes was amazed by her expertise and genuine passion for military service. Palace security and other guards watched the interaction with interest, understanding that they were witnessing something special. The rigid formality that usually characterized interactions between the Queen's Guard and the public had given way to a genuine human connection based on mutual respect and shared values about service and duty. Emma's parents explained how their daughter's medical challenges had never diminished her spirit or her dreams of somehow serving her community. She had often expressed wishes to be a soldier like her brother, and today's experience had given her a tangible connection to the military world she so admired. As their conversation continued, Sergeant Hayes made a decision that would extend this special day even further. He asked Emma's parents if they would allow him to arrange a brief tour of the Guard facilities, where Emma could meet other soldiers and learn more about the daily life of the Queen's Guard. The offer was extended not as a formal protocol, but as a personal gesture of respect for a remarkable young person. The invitation was accepted with overwhelming gratitude, and arrangements were made for the following day. Emma would have the opportunity to see behind the scenes of one of Britain's most prestigious military units. Guided by the same soldier who had recognized the sincerity of her salute and chosen compassion over protocol in a moment that had already become legendary among those who witnessed it. The following morning, Emma arrived at the designated meeting point, wearing her best dress and carrying a small notebook where she had written down questions for the guards she would meet. Her excitement was barely contained as Sergeant Hayes, now in his dress uniform, welcomed the family and began what would become the most memorable tour in the history of the Queen's Guard facilities. The private tour took Emma through areas of the barracks that were normally off-limits to civilians, where she met soldiers from different regiments and learned about their daily routines, training requirements, and the pride they took in serving their country. Each guard they encountered had heard about the previous day's exchange and was eager to meet the young girl whose salute had moved their colleague to break centuries-old protocol. Emma's questions impressed every soldier she met, demonstrating knowledge that surpassed many military enthusiasts with decades of study. She asked about the weight of their equipment, the history of their regimental traditions, and the personal motivations that had led each man to pursue service with the Queen's Guard. Her genuine interest and respectful attitude won over even the most serious-minded soldiers. The tour culminated in a special ceremony arranged specifically for Emma, where she was presented with an honorary certificate recognizing her as an honorary friend of the Queen's Guard. The document, signed by Captain Thompson himself, acknowledged her demonstrated respect for military traditions and her inspiring example of how civilians can honor those who serve their country. News of Emma's story had spread through social media and news outlets around the world, with videos of her original salute and Sergeant Hayes' response being viewed millions of times. Messages of support and admiration poured in from military personnel, veterans and civilians from dozens of countries, all moved by this demonstration of mutual respect between a young girl and the soldiers she honored. 3 months later, Emma received an invitation that surprised even her wildest dreams. The Queen herself had learned of the young girl's story and requested a private audience at Buckingham Palace. Emma would have the opportunity to meet the sovereign, whose guard she had saluted with such perfect form and genuine respect. The private meeting with the Queen was arranged to accommodate Emma's wheelchair and medical needs, with palace staff ensuring that every detail would make the experience comfortable and memorable for the remarkable young girl. Emma spent weeks preparing, practicing her curtsy from her wheelchair, and studying royal protocol with the same dedication she had shown for military traditions. On the day of the audience, Emma wore a new dress specially made for the occasion, with her future soldier pin prominently displayed and her hair adorned with the same red ribbon she had worn to the original ceremony. The Queen, known for her own deep appreciation of military service, spent nearly an hour speaking with Emma about her knowledge of military traditions and her respect for those who serve. The Queen presented Emma with a special commendation, recognizing her as an exemplary young citizen who had demonstrated the values of respect, courage, and appreciation for military service. The presentation was photographed for the Royal Archives, ensuring that Emma's story would become part of the official history of remarkable encounters at Buckingham Palace. Sergeant Hayes was also recognized for his compassionate decision to acknowledge Emma's salute, receiving a commendation for demonstrating that true military bearing sometimes requires the courage to choose humanity over rigid protocol. His actions had been reviewed and officially approved by his superiors, who recognized that he had upheld the highest values of military service. Emma's story inspired the creation of a new program connecting young people with physical challenges to military personnel, allowing them to learn about service traditions and develop relationships with soldiers who understood the importance of courage in overcoming obstacles. The program was named Emma's Salute in honor of the young girl whose respect for military service had touched hearts around the world. Years later, as Emma grew older, she continued to correspond with Sergeant Hayes and many of the other guards she had met. Her brother returned safely from his overseas deployment, bringing with him stories of how Emma's viral salute had been shared among troops in his unit, inspiring them during difficult moments far from home. The wheelchair that had carried Emma to Buckingham Palace that fateful day was eventually donated to the Imperial War Museum, where it became part of an exhibition about civilians who had made extraordinary contributions to honoring military service. Visitors from around the world could see the chair and learn the story of how one little girl's perfect salute had reminded everyone that respect, courage, and human compassion are the true foundations of military honor. Emma's legacy lived on in the countless people who had been moved by her story, reminding them all that sometimes the most powerful gestures come from the smallest hands, and that true respect for service knows no boundaries of age, physical ability, or circumstance. Her salute had become a symbol of how genuine appreciation can bridge any gap between those who serve and those who honor their service.